My name is Kiara from Nordic Pioneers, and this is episode 4, I believe, of our video podcast. And we're doing this to inspire other young people to take action in their local communities by talking to people who've done that themselves. And today we're joined by our jury member, Nima Tisdall. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Nima. I'm the co-founder of a company called Blue Lobster, where it's a digital platform where we help sustainable fishermen sell their catch locally, and we're on kind of on a mission to create a more sustainable fishing industry. I'm also the co-founder of something called SEGA, which is a non-partisan youth organization, political youth organization, where we're trying to engage young Danish people in our democracy again, because we can see there's kind of a split between their involvement in civil society, but not so much in classical politics. It might seem a little bit scary for some.
Yeah, great. So I know that you have a lot of projects and you definitely have a lot of good things to say, but I think we'll start going through one by one, like the things that you do, starting with Blue Lobster that you just mentioned. Was this your first entrepreneurial idea?
It was definitely not my first idea. I had my first startup my first company was in high school. I started with a friend, and it was kind of like a waitressing on demand. So we basically started going, me and my friend, to events like birthdays and weddings and confirmations, which is a big thing in Denmark, and being waitresses. And our angle was kind of just having nice energy and always being solution oriented and solving everyone's problems. And that kind of grew, and we ended up having kind of a little business over a few years. I don't think I really thought of it as like a business as such, but we did run it, and we had employees that we paid wages, and yeah.
Oh wow! During high school.
During high school, and then we closed it down because we both wanted to travel the world, and and then I was like, we need to get real education and stuff. So then I started a business school, and then we actually closed down the company because I started in business school.
Okay, but how was it starting that at such a young age?
It was fun. It was really fun. It was difficult because we were 16, so we couldn't actually own a bank account or start a company. So we did it. I think technically my co-founder's dad owned the company through one of his companies, and then we got to use his bookkeeping people and all that stuff, so that was helpful. And then I think our bank account was in the name of my co-founder's boyfriend at the time. Yeah, anyway.
Okay, a lot of loopholes.
Lots of loopholes, because we weren't legally allowed to own it, but it was a lot of fun, and it just felt like I think it was before this hype around entrepreneurship really came. So I don't think I used any of those words. It was a feeling that I wanted to create something,
Yeah. But were there any other obstacles? I mean, apart from the legal things, were there any people that sort of looked down on it because of your age, because you were so young?
I think, to be honest, most people just thought we were kind of cute. It was sweet that we were trying. So I don't think so. Because to be honest, once we got out there, we always did have the most professional team. So we would actually go to bigger events and maybe come. I remember one specific event where there was a company having a big party, and we only came with maybe a third of the wait staff from our roster of people. And our wait staff just really performed well, because we basically trained them in saying, you've got to just smile, be nice to people. When things go wrong, fix it. Yeah. And if you don't know how to fix it, figure it out. And that's what we were training. We're training people's problem-solving skills more than their actual waitressing skills and bartending skills. But that attitude really shone through. So after that, we got to do all of that event companies' events as the wait staff, because they were like, well, from now on we'll just use you guys, because you guys know how to train people. So I think we kind of earned that respect on the floor.
Yeah, that's great. And then, so how did the Blue Lobster idea come along, and how old were you? What stage of life were you at?
So I was in university. I guess I was 25, something like that, 24, 25. And my co-founder came from the US. Her name is Christine, and she had studied her master's here in Denmark, and we knew each other as friends as well. So often, it starts with a friendship that then builds into a company for some reason. But she had thought that she didn't know where to find fresh fish, basically. And she came to me and she's like, Nima, where, you Danes, you must be hiding all the fresh fish somewhere. And we weren't. We just have a really complicated logistics system around getting fish from the fisherman to the customer. On average, it can take 4 days, and if you go into a supermarket, it can actually be up to 16 days old. And those are the kind of issues we started to uncover. But very practically, we went down to the harbors after we spoke, and we couldn't really figure out what was going on. We went down to the harbors, like knocked on the boats basically, and we were like, where do you sell your fish? And they were like, oh, through this middleman and this guy and this guy and this. And we found out there's like 5-6 middlemen between the fisherman and the customer. And we thought, okay, we can do that better. Like, we've got technology, we can create a little app, which is what we did. Yeah, so that's how it started. And then the environmental thing came afterwards because we were new in the industry. So we wanted to understand, we could see that by cutting out so many middlemen, we could actually pay the fishermen a much better price for their catch. So in the beginning we thought, okay, this is a great social project. But then we're like, okay, well, if we have this kind of market power, then let's use it for good.
Yeah.
So we found out what was the most sustainable equipment to use, and then we only work with those guys. So we basically give them a benefit for using the right equipment in terms of climate.
Okay. And was there, I mean, from the moment that you got the idea to sort of acting on it, what was the transition there? What made you take the leap, and what was the leap?
I don't think it felt so much as a leap, actually. So Christine came with the idea, so that already was, there's kind of an idea-ish there to start working on. And then I think we did something that was very helpful, which was, we said in 3 months, if we can kind of flesh out the idea a little bit more, we'll keep going. And then we said, okay, that we fleshed it out. We say, okay, in 3 months, if people still think it's a good idea, we'll keep going. And then people thought it was a great idea. And we thought, okay, if within 6 months we made our first sale, we'll keep going. And then that kind of just reinforced itself until we were just in it and running the business, basically.
Great.
Yeah.
And I've seen also recently you've spoken a lot about how it is to be a woman as an entrepreneur and in this sort of, in this sort of field.
Yeah.
Has this been a challenge at times? Have people looked at you differently because of that, or had a weird attitude towards you? Yeah,
I think it's inevitable, to be honest. We're 2 female founders working in the intersection between technology, fishing, and the restaurant industry. So, and the startup scene in general. So, I mean, we're just in all these male-dominated places. We stick out like sore thumbs, and people are like, so of course it makes a difference, because I think anytime someone who doesn't look like the average person walks into a space, people take notice, and that can be a good thing, but it also just means that people are a bit unsure on how to react and how to work with you. And yeah, so I would say for sure we've experienced being treated differently because we were different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how have you overcome this?
I think you got to just push through. And I know that's super frustrating as a piece of advice, but just ignore it and make sure that, so we've definitely been spoken down to as women. We've been really inappropriate comments a lot of times. And also, it could be sexually charged, but it could also just be things like women shouldn't be in this business. Or,
undermining.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you got to just be like, well, you got to back yourself somehow and be like, well, I'm going to just push through this. And for me, it actually helped having a network of guy friends who I shared my experiences with, because they got outraged. So I noticed that when I shared my experiences with my female friends, they were like, oh, well, yeah, that sucks. Life,
Yeah.
But when I started with my male friends, they got really mad because many of them didn't know these things were happening. And they actually gave me firepower to go back and be like, nah, next time something bad happened, I would be like, that's not cool. But I have to say, the confidence to do that actually came from mostly men supporting me, because they were the ones that could tell me this wouldn't have happened to me. No one would have ever said these things to me. I even had a guy at one point where I would forward emails that I was like, ooh, is this okay for someone? Is this inappropriate? I would send it to my friend and he would be like, absolutely not. And then he would answer for me. He would draft out the answer and I'd send it back. So I know it sounds weird, but all my emails for a while there those types of emails were charged with masculine energy because it was actually my friend who'd written them. And people got pissed. People thought, they were like, you're so confrontational, you're so blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, I don't even take it personally because I didn't write it. So using your network like that to mirror your own experiences really helped a lot. And then you got to just push through. And you'll be on the right side of history if
It's a frustrating thing to go through because you'll get called confrontational, but if they knew that a man had written that email, they wouldn't blink an eye, because it's coming from a woman.
You should.
They think it's coming from a
exactly.
woman.
Exactly. So I mean that's just a way of distancing yourself a little bit from the actual confrontations you need to take. And then I think another thing is it's super annoying talking about feminism in Denmark because people get super mad. And it's one of the most tiring debates. I've just spoken to a bunch of trawlers who also hate what I do in the fishing industry, and they're like, oh, I'm so mad at you. But like, at least I get them. I'm like, yeah, okay, I am kind of criticizing your way of fishing, so I get that you're mad, and I'm trying to push a green transition, and that sucks for you. Like, I get it. But the feminism debate, oh my God, that is frustrating on a whole different level. People get mad, people get emotional, and I think it's because we don't have a feeling that we have an issue around it in Denmark. So we're kind of in denial. Like if we were, I don't know, in the 12-step program of like recovery, then we're still in the denial phase. A lot of us, at least.
So and why would you say that is?
I think it's because we used to be ahead. I think we used to. Denmark and Scandinavia were, pioneers in gender equality for many years. I think we were doing a good job. But we're about 20 years, 30 years after we were doing a good job now. And Denmark specifically has fucked up. Like Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Finland, they're not doing as badly as we are. It's us, it's Denmark. We're doing poorly. And we can see that in all statistics, right? We're falling down on the global gender index where we don't have very many, I work in entrepreneurship, we don't have many women in entrepreneurship. We don't have a lot of women in entrepreneurship actually getting money to fund their projects. We have lots of issues. But I think we still look at our neighboring Scandinavian countries and assume we're the same. So yeah, I think that's why we're in the denial phase.
Yeah. Well, you're lovely. People like you are trailblazers in this area, and you've managed to push through, as you said. And you're now part of some incredible communities like Forbes 30 Under 30 and the Obama Foundation. Can you explain what these are? Yeah, so I mean, the Forbes 30 Under 30 list is really just a list. So I would say there's some community around it. We've met. I was at a summit last year for it where I just met a bunch of other cool people. But I mean, I think being on that list is mostly just a recognition thing, and that was very cool and a definite milestone. But that's kind of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's cool. But the Obama Foundation I've been really happy to be a part of because they really build a lot of community. And I was part of the first cohort here in Europe, and basically the Obama Foundation moved into Europe to create this network of leaders within civil society and impact to give us a support system, because it can get really, really lonely fighting a fight by yourself. Because I think people forget, like, I go out and I talk about stuff, and I'm in a panel and I'm talking about things, and I go on TV or something and say something, and I get into arguments with people, and I get a lot of debate, and then I go home to my own apartment, and that's it. Like, I don't have a big organization supporting what I do on the gender equality thing, for example. And I do have my team when it comes to climate impact and entrepreneur, and fishing. But you are kind of an island. You can easily feel alone, and you forget that you just have a normal life, and then you have to pack away all the people who disagree with you and go have a nice time with their friends. It can actually be tough to balance just having a normal life if you're participating in the public discussions and discourses that much. So I think having a community is helpful, even if it's kind of informal, which I think, to be fair, like the Obama Foundation took us through a program where they taught us some stuff through workshops and stuff, and that was very helpful. But really what they've created is an informal network where we have support with one another, and I think that's super valuable. Yeah. And at the end of the day, what would you say that, I mean, with all these accomplishments and stuff, what would you say that success truly feels like and looks like to you? Oh, that's a good question. I think it's so hard to define your own success, because I think I'm ambitious. I probably am an ambitious person, so I always have very, very high expectations of everything I do. And so I don't think I'm ever really satisfied. I don't think I've ever really felt, wow, I am proud of. That's not true. We wrote a cookbook for Blue Lobster, and I'm very proud of that. I was like, damn, we wrote a book. Like, that was cool. But I think the idea of success is difficult, because if you are truly creating something new and you're being ambitious, you're always going to fall a little bit short, if that makes sense. Like, you're pushing an agenda, but if you're pushing against the status quo, someone's going to push back. So your end goal is never actually going to be what you realize at the end of it. So I think there's a disconnect there, and then you can feel like you didn't succeed, and that can be tough. And I don't think I have a good recipe for how to feel more successful, because I think I feel like a failure all the time. But at the end of the day,
I would be very happy with my life if I felt I'd actually made a difference in other people's. And I generally I want to change the world for the better. And if I can just push it a little bit in that direction, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, which I think you're already doing. So there's lots to be happy about. But yeah, could you tell me a bit about Saga now?
Yeah.
What is Saga?
Yeah, so Saga we started just under 2 years ago now, and it's basically a organization for young people to get involved in politics without it being so scary. So we've basically taken politics and then taking the traditional parties out of it. Now in Denmark we have like 12 political parties or something. It's quite a lot. So it can be overwhelming, and the debate, as I said, can be kind of tough. You see the public discourses, you see these panels on TV and you're like, do I want to get involved with that?
Yeah.
I didn't, to be sure. So when I started my company, it was because I had also a passion for the green transition. Me and my co-founder met each other co-organizing a climate conference together. So that was our ambition. And I always saw the private sector as a place I could make change more than I did politics. And really that's sad, because a lot of the issues that need to be solved in climate change need to come through politics. But I literally thought it was too scary to do that. So I decided to start a company instead. And I think me and my 3 co-founders of Saga kind of had that same feeling of, we want to be involved, we care about the society we live in, but we're not attracted to classical politics. And also we can't really find out where we fit in it. Yeah. Like in the classical ideologies, I might not be able to find a party that I really felt connected to. And joining a political party felt like a really big commitment that I wasn't necessarily ready to, because I felt like I was signing off on a whole bunch of values, and I didn't really necessarily find anyone where I agreed on every single point, you know? And what we can see with young people is we tend to choose specific issues we care about. It could be climate or gender equality or mental health or education or, you know, anti-racism. It could be a lot of things. But we take one thing and we're kind of intense about it. So we also kind of vote according to that one thing that we care about. So what we're trying to do with Saga is basically we crowdsource 3 issues at a time from our members that they care about. Right now it is climate, mental health, and education. Then we, with the help of experts, tailor legislation that would help that issue. And then we lobby it through Parliament. And we basically say, hey, listen, we're talking on behalf, at least at this point, about 1,600 young people. So you can listen to us or you cannot. And we're trying to come with solutions, not just point out the problems. Yeah.
Okay. And so this might be like a commonsensical question, I guess, but I asked yes for the same question. Yeah. Why do you think youth involvement in politics is important?
Great question. I think it's a great, I think youth involvement in politics is important because it is the future, and I'm scared that if youth aren't involved, they won't feel heard, and they will lose faith in our democratic structures. That's the quick answer. Yeah. To pull it out a little bit, we have in this part of the world, a population that's getting older and older. That means that 50% of the votes right now are with the 50 plus. Which means that if everyone in Denmark under 49 down, every single person in the whole country decided that we wanted to pass a piece of legislation, we wouldn't have the democratic ability to do so, because the votes are stacked against us. And as we get older and older and older, that's only going to get worse. So at some point it's going to be 65 years. And if you look at people under 30, right now we only represent about 17% of the vote. Now, that's how democracies work, right? That's just how it is. So some people might say, right, like that's just, you know, you are as many people as you are, and then you get those votes. But I think there's a disconnect between when the people who are living in it represent less than basically a fifth of the vote. So there's no reason for politicians to talk to the young people, because we can't move anything with our votes. There's not enough born in our generation, and also people are just getting so old that it's easy to overlook us. And I just, as I said, I think I'm scared that as people feel overlooked, and I think they do, they will start looking towards other structures than democracy and say, it's just something that would work better. Yeah. And I think they'll stop going to, I mean, the worst case is they stop going to polls, they stop voting. We saw that France recently had a relatively bad youth election. But I get it. Because truly, the truth is, if all the young people went out to vote, we would move very little. So we need to lobby together somehow, separately, to make our voice heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you think about, I mean, some countries are starting to talk about lowering the voting age to
right.
16. Is that something that you think could at least partially solve this problem?
It would help with the demographic stuff. To be honest, it's not one of the causes that I am most passionate about. But of course, I mean, it's statistics, right? So if we feel like someone at 16 is able to make that choice and they're involved, then I think the criticism that comes up is, do they know enough? Yeah. But to be fair, I think that can be raised to all age groups. When do you know enough to be involved in your democracy? And I think that's a fundamental issue, right? And I often say that you need a strong education system to lay the foundation for a working democracy. That sounded so dry. That sounded so dry, but you need.
It's true.
But it's true. But you need people to know what they're talking about. You need to engage people and talk to them in words not like that, but that they'll actually understand, and they get involved. So yeah, I think lowering the age is definitely something you could do. Yeah.
But you say it's not like one of your main passion things, but what would you say then is the most urgent, or one of the most urgent changes you think should happen in the Nordic societies and communities in terms of youth engagement in politics and just in general?
I think something that's important is that we start looking at youth representation in decision-making organs. That means councils and places where people make decisions, and committees within the government. We need to get young people into those. And what we see is a lot of people creating youth boards, which are great, but they basically take a bunch of young people, put them around a round table like this and say, give us some recommendations, and we'll take it to the actual decision makers who will then decide if they like your recommendations or not. That's great. It's a great first step. But we also need to bring some of those young people into the decision-making rooms so that they can actually sit at the table and have an actual voting right. And that could be in companies, it could be in NGOs, it could be in civil society, in politics specifically. It would be great to have them in some of these committees and councils that are put down to actually flesh out the legislation that's then passed. I think that'd be great. Make sure, because a lot of them are appointed by politicians, so ensure that there's diversity. We speak a lot about gender diversity, but we should also be looking at age as a
quota.
As a quote, something like that, as something that we aspire to, because I think what young people bring is a little bit of naivety. We are a little bit overly ambitious. We do think we haven't learned all the things that are impossible yet. And I think that's important. And of course, it's also important that we get a say in the world we want to live in, because someone at 60 now, it's not because that person doesn't know how to make good decisions, but they lived and they were raised in a different world under different circumstances. Anyone under 30 today has been raised with, let's say, in the post the inconvenient truth time, where we all know climate change is an issue. You meet very few young people who question that, because we were raised with it. Since we were that big, I've known that climate change was an issue, and now it's 20 years later and we still haven't done very much about it. But for the older generations, that's an example of something that had to change in their mindset. So yeah. Get some young people into the decision-making rooms, and I think that would be a good start.
And for young people wanting to do that, they often have a lot of things to balance on the side.
Right.
You do that as well. Do you have any advice for how to balance school, studies, family, friends, all these projects?
Oh God, if someone has good life balance skills, send them my way. I need the advice too. No, but it's tough. I'm not gonna lie. Of course it's tough. And I don't want to pretend it's not, because I think somehow that makes it worse. If someone seems like they've got control over everything, you're like, how do you do that? The truth is, we're all struggling. But I would say the quicker you realize that taking care of yourself is a priority for all the work that you do, the better. And I have definitely deprioritized myself for a long time and my own well-being. But I realized it's exactly like they say in the plane, you got to put your own face mask on or the oxygen mask on before you help someone else. It's the exact same thing. If you go down, you can't help anyone.
That's a really good metaphor.
Thank you.
It's called.
But you got to take care of yourself, and you will become better. And I've realized, it sounds so obvious, but taking breaks makes you better. Working, I think we have some studies that say if you work over 50 hours a week on something, that you can actually become less effective. So it's a really nice study to just hang your hat on and say, I'm going to work those 50 hours. And then after that, I'm going to step away from things. Because the truth is, you also become more creative. And I think in the future, with automation and things like ChatGPT, who can do a lot of the kind of boring manual tasks that we're used to spending a lot of time on. We need to be more creative. That's what we're going to have as humans. It's our creativity, it's our novelty, it's our ability to imagine and think critically about stuff. For that, we need headspace. So feel free to step away, take your weekends, spend your evenings with your friends, and prioritize it as part of your work, because it's going to make you better.
That's solid advice. All right, what gives you hope for the future in terms of the direction youth engagement is headed? The young people give me hope for the future, honestly, because you could be dissuaded when you hear the media and you hear people saying the youth are not engaged or they don't care about society, they don't care about what's going on. It's not true. It's not my experience, at least. We see that the majority of Danish young people have a opinion about where society should be going, and when the people that I meet through my work in Sega, they're very opinionated in the best way. They have things they feel that are important for our society, and I'm sure they're going to change the world. I know it. So I just want to help give them tools to do that quicker, and I want to make sure that they don't get met by a system that makes them forget their dreams. Because I think that's maybe the risk. What gives me hope is the young people themselves, because I can see it, and they're very conscious. We've got an incredibly conscious generation of people who understand that things are complex and that things are interrelated, and that's awesome. Now, if they're met with a system that starts breaking down on their dreams from day one, well, I worry about that. So moving obstacles away from the people who are trailblazing ahead and letting them be a little bit naive and letting them try some things that are probably going to fail, that's fine. Like, they'll figure it out with time. But just, we can't lose that little bit of excitement, naivety, and ambition on behalf of our society. Yeah, absolutely. And you're writing a book now, I've heard, about entrepreneurship and mental health.
Yes, yeah.
What is... I mean, you've already actually touched on it a bit, but what is the link between, or what is the link that you're making in your book between entrepreneurship and mental health? So I decided to write a book about mental health and entrepreneurship when I was going to meet a friend for coffee in the morning, and I get a text message that says, I can't meet you anyway, I'm in the hospital. And I was like, oh shit, are you okay? And no, I think I had a stroke. And so I'm here for observation. This person's around 30 years old, way too young to be having strokes. And the person says, oh yeah, that's because I'm stressed. I actually wanted to meet with you to talk about it because I don't feel like I have anyone to talk to about it. And I was, trying to figure out, should I come to the hospital, whatever. But basically this was a Friday, and on the Saturday, I was trying to see if I could go give them some soup or something. And they were like, oh, I'm back at work because I missed my working day on Friday, so now I got to work on Saturday. And I got like almost angry at the person. I was like, what are you doing at work? You need to be at home, resting, recovering. But then I realized I've done the same. I have pushed myself in that same way where my body said no, and I just kept going. And I realized we weren't the only ones either. When I just looked at my own network of fellow entrepreneurs and founders, so many people had crazy, scary stories about when their bodies just gave in. So I started writing out to people and said, geez, is this something you want to share? My own network, but also just people, anyone from the age of I think 75 to 19 is the age span, and people who've had multiple successful companies, people who've had bankruptcies, people who are in their first company, people who are only investing now, but everyone who's had a founding experience. And I think I wrote out to 45 people first, and every single person wrote back and said, yes, this is important, I have a story. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what my point is, there's a huge interrelationship between starting something from scratch and mental health and stress, because you have all of these incredible pressures on you. You want to prove the world right, or prove the world wrong, whatever. You want to prove that your company can succeed. You want to you're going to create work for your employees. You want to maybe get a return for your investors. You want to build something out of nothing that you don't know is going to work yet. And then at the same time, you probably have family and friends who might not exactly understand what you're going through. So it can be a really isolating experience. And my mission with the book is not to scare people from being entrepreneurs, but it's to have a more honest conversation about what it's actually like. Because I felt like there was a big disconnect between people in the front of magazines, and they're like, oh my God, I just raised millions of kroner, or I just sold all this stuff. And then talking to them behind the scenes, they're like, I want to go home and cry. And I was like, that's not healthy. It's not healthy to be have that big of a disconnect between what we're signaling to the outside world and what's happening behind the scenes. And again, I worried about the next generation of entrepreneurs. They don't have to be young, but just anyone going in for the first time, being unsure about whether they were fucking up more than anyone else. Because I think a lot of people felt that their first fuck-ups were the worst because they were so insecure.
Right.
And they didn't know that people have done this a million times. People have made this fuck up and they've survived and it's normal. So yeah, trying to normalize and create a more honest picture about what it's like being in a startup journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for that to come out. Do you have a working title or?
Well,
or
yeah, the working title is Startup Stress.
Okay,
So
that's a good one.
yeah, we'll see if it sticks. If my editor will let me keep it, but that's the working title. Yeah.
Do you have do you know when it's gonna come out or?
The quick answer is no, because I've decided that I will not get stressed about a book about stress. So it's going to come out when it's ready. But I mean, hopefully within foreseeable future, months, not years.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been working on it?
Low key, about a year now. A bit less, but I started my first interviews in about April last year, and then I was really just meeting with a couple people a month. And then this January, I really sat down. I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to a lot of people, and I'm going to write out a lot of drafts. So now we're in like the midst of editing. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's exciting work.
Yeah.
I just have a couple general questions for you now before we round off. But can you say a little bit about why you're part of the Nordic Pioneers jury?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm part of the Nordic Pioneers jury because I think it's important. I think it's really important to, as I said, create a community for young people who are doing a good job, because it can be isolating. I think I want to give people who are going above and beyond that feeling of success, because the world is filled with failures, and you are probably your biggest critic. So if you're one of those people out there who is young, and your peers might not be doing the same kind of stuff that you are, because you're really, I mean, the candidates and the winners are outstanding humans. Like, I don't understand how they did so much with their lives already. But I mean, they're out competing everyone in their network. Otherwise, they have the craziest networks ever. But it means that they're also kind of maybe alone with their experiences. So both to give some support, but also some recognition and say, hell yeah, like you're doing a good job. And give them that momentum and that push to keep doing it. So they get stamina to continue. And not get pushed down by some system that means that they stop after they're 25.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to a young person who has yet to sort of start their project but is kind of holding back because they're scared of failing or not being as good as someone else?
Yeah. The annoying but the easy and true piece of advice is to just get started, because it's okay if you fail. And the truth is you will fail. You will fail many, many, many times. So the more times you get to fail, the quicker you're through your early failures, and over time you'll fail less often, but you'll still fail. But if you have something that you care about as a young person, or any person, and you want to get started on your first thing, it's just one step at a time. And I remember my mom actually saying that to me a lot, because I was always very grand in my ideas and I wanted to change the world, and I would sit and plan out the things. She's like, you got to just take the first step, right? And I think that's it. If you want to start an NGO that's going to create the biggest book club in the world for people who love fantasy or something, you've got to just find the first 5 people who want to be part of your book club, and then you'll grow it from there. You don't have to find 2,000 to get started. Just start a little bit, and get comfortable with sharing your idea. Get comfortable asking for help, because the world is built together, not alone. So the quicker you can come out and figure out how to talk to other people and rally them around your cause, the better, because you'll need them all. Yeah.
Well said. Is there anything that you want to add before we finish off for today?
That's a good question. Now I'm just buying time because I have to think about it. I think trust yourself. It took me a while to really trust myself. Even though I had already started my company and things, I really thought that everyone else knew something that I didn't. I always thought that people had some secret code, and everyone that was successful knew something that I did not know. And that's bullshit. There is no secret recipe. Your knowledge is completely valid. And if you are, let's say, 14 years old and you have a lot of knowledge about just your specific community, that is very unique knowledge, and it's more powerful than you think. And some politicians sitting in parliament might actually lack exactly that information that you have. They don't know that. So don't ever assume that people know something just because you do. And I hope that would help people speak up in rooms, because sometimes if you're sitting at a table with very intimidating people, you could be nervous of like, they probably already know what I'm going to say. What I'm thinking is probably obvious. It's not necessarily obvious, so say it. And that's what gives credibility to being in the room, right? So yeah, trust in yourself. When you have a gut instinct, follow it, and but know that your experience and your knowledge has value. Yeah.
Those are great words to finish off our little chat today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming. It really means a lot. And
of course.
Yeah, looking forward to the rest of this journey and this project, and to see what you end up doing next.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I'm excited to see what you guys do next and who the next nominees are.
Yeah, very exciting. Yeah, our nomination platform is open, so if you know anyone who deserves to be acknowledged for all the great work that they do, then go ahead and nominate on our website.